MIT Hyperloop team, Max Opgenord.
Next slide, please. Thank you for that introduction. So it's my pleasure to talk to you today about the Hyperloop concept and about the exciting work a team of 35 students has done here on this concept on campus. So what is a Hyperloop? Next, please. So the Hyperloop was proposed by Elon Musk back in 2013 as an alternative to the extremely expensive high-speed rail currently being built between LA and San Francisco. So it consists of pods traveling at through low-pressure tubes at transonic speed, so think upwards of 700 miles an hour. And however, Musk didn't have time to take on another venture, so instead he open sourced it and encouraged other people to take on the idea. And he also presented his take on what a Hyperloop should look like, and he presented the Hyperloop Alpha concept. So that pod could carry around 20 people, could go at 700 miles an hour, and he used air bearings, so it was basically like an inverted air hockey table. However, that concept was not finished, far from it. There were still a lot of questions that needed to be answered, but it was enough to get a lot of people excited about the concept. So now fast forward to June 2015. There's still a lot of media attention for the project, and at least 3 companies are founded to take on the challenge. However, Musk didn't think progress was being made fast enough, so he started this worldwide engineering competition to design and build Hyperloop pods. And that's where the MIT Hyperloop team comes in. So our team was founded to participate in this competition, as were 1,100 teams from all over the world. Now, being a student team, we had to limit what we were trying to achieve. So we focused only on the pod design, and therein we focused on high-speed, low-drag levitation, and attitude control and braking. Now, we didn't have onboard propulsion because it was a SpaceX pusher that pushes us up to speed. And we also didn't really focus on passenger comfort, only like putting a small dummy in there. And then we wanted to have everything designed, built, and assembled by May of 2016, so quite a tough schedule. And this is what we came up with. So this is a scaled prototype, so it's 8 foot long, it weighs 570 pounds, and we can accelerate at 2.4 Gs to reach a top speed of 250 miles an hour. Now, everything is covered by a lightweight aerodynamic shell, and we use electrodynamic suspension for levitation. So it's a form of passive Maglev. So basically, if you take a magnet and you move it over a conducting surface, you generate an opposing magnetic field, which gives you a lift force. The brakes use the exact same physical principle, only then focused on optimized for maximum drag. And we took this design to competition design weekend in January of 2016 to convince SpaceX to let us continue in the rest of the competition. We ended up doing quite well. We took home best overall design from this competition. Coming back to MIT after that, we only had 4 months to build and assemble the entire project. But at the same time, we also needed to test whether our concepts actually worked. So for instance, here you can see a test from a scaled levitation cart, which is shot down a track section in the basement of Stata Center, where we test different magnetic arrays setups. Then after 4 months of hard work, we unveiled our pod at the MIT Museum on May 13th. Next, please. Where we didn't really give it that much thought at that time, but this was the first ever physical Hyperloop prototype being shown to the world. Then we did some more tests over summer and fall, and then we took this design to SpaceX's headquarters in Hawthorne, California, for the final competition in January of 2017. Next, please. Then we were one of only 3 teams allowed to do a final run at high speed. So for this competition run, we also were able to demonstrate our, please start the video, at high speed. So this was unfortunately capped at 100 kilometers an hour, but it was enough to show that we have stable passive magnetic levitation. So here, we're still riding on our wheels because it's below our liftoff speed, but now you can see that the wheel stopped rotating, so we're actually floating on our magnets right now. So the pusher is still pushing us. Then at some point, we release from the pusher, coast for another couple hundred feet, which happens now, and then we come to a full stop. So this showed that we have stable passive magnetic levitation. It was the first run. Now, as a student team, we were able to achieve a lot. In January of 2016, next please. In January of 2016, we were the first team to unveil a physical Hyperloop prototype to win design weekend. Then we were the first team to unveil a physical Hyperloop prototype, and we were the first ever pod to do a fully high-speed run in vacuum. We also won the Safety and Reliability Award and took home 3rd overall from that competition. Now, obviously, this wouldn't have been possible without the support from both the school and our sponsors. And if you would like to learn more about the project, we did bring the aerodynamic shell with us today, and we have team members here from 11 until 11 a.m. and then after 3:30 p.m. So please come talk to us. Thank you for your attention.
Please welcome co-founder and CEO, Build Palestine, Besan Abu-Joudeh.
That's me.
Oh, shoot. Oh.
Founder and CEO, Village Healthworks, Deogratias. And Debbie Berebichez.
Hi again. So, it's nice to be back. Our panel is titled, How Can We Harness Talent and Ingenuity Everywhere to Solve Global Challenges? And I think the 2 stories that we have on stage with Deogratias and with Besan are illustrative of why we should invest in the long tail, in places and in people that sometimes don't have direct access to capital, education, opportunities, and why their success stories are really what propels the world forward. I was very, very moved to read Deo's story. Deo, you escaped ethnic cleansing, you went through poverty, you went through homelessness in New York. You succeeded by getting yourself educated. Your story is amazing. It's actually been written about by Tracy Kidder in a book called Strength with What Remains, which I just purchased and I intend to read. And I was moved to tears reading about all that you went through, and then you managed to go through 3 Ivy League education institutions, come out of it on the other end, and then you went back to Burundi, where you're originally from, one of the poorest countries in the world, and you've built your company, Village Healthworks. Can you give us your perspective on what it's like to come back to your country, but now armed with powerful tools to help?
Well, thank you very much. Well, I went back because it was I really had no other opportunity or choice. I had to go there. But how many people know that there's a country called Burundi? Oh my gosh, I am at home. Well, the reason why I'm asking you this is that very, very quickly, several years ago, I had been in the United States for so long before going back to Burundi. And I was traveling on a green card before becoming an American citizen. So I came back with a friend of mine here in Boston. We were working together in Rwanda. And then when I was at JFK, this immigration officer looked at my Burundian passport and then searching and asking me, where are you from? Where were you born? And I said Burundi. I had a sheer exhaustion. I was very tired. And I said Burundi. Then he's searching and he asked me again, are you sure it's not Burma? Well, I said it was Burundi when I left. And I regret it really. You can imagine. So I went back to Burundi. I left in 1994 and went back in 2005. And I was working with the Partners in Health and the Clinton Foundation in Rwanda. And somehow I heard a story about my mother who was very sick. And I went to see her. It had been years since the last time I saw her. And visited this hospital that was the only hospital available for hundreds of thousands of people. I had no running water. The operating room had no ventilation system, had no air conditioner. It was a place where health providers didn't have anything at all, tools to use to see patients. It was a place where patients were going to become sicker and watch themselves die. I talked to the medical director whether he could show me around. And he told me a lot of stories, one being showing me this room where patients who were unable to pay were detained, incarcerated. After being through horror. So I didn't see Hutus, I didn't see Tutsis, I didn't see women or men, children. I saw human beings in these conditions. Those were people who were taught how different they were from one another and who ran away from their villages and away from each other when they were neighbors for over a decade. You know about Hotel Rwanda, you know about Rwanda, but the horror started in Burundi, but Burundi is completely off the map, completely neglected. So in this kind of situation, the conditions, what were really my choices? I was devastated by the conditions I saw patients and healthcare providers were working in. Well, I approached those patients and some people in my community, and I said, well, simple thing. I asked them, well, when you are unable to pay for substandard care, and you happen to end up in these hospitals, and you cannot pay, you become prisoners, and you become friends. Former enemies become friends from these kind of conditions. And they realized that they had more in common that one had divided them. So I asked them a simple question, can we come together? Can you remain friends outside of these conditions and bring decency where it had been lost? So you asked me about the opportunities, how we worked, was first to bring people to come together, which is so important because they didn't have anyone in between to tell them who they were, but to have a conversation. The second opportunity was to actually tell them that I didn't have money. Whatever they were going to do, I was traveling on my student loans, and they were going to work to change their living conditions themselves. We have a saying in Burundi that whatever comes from outside into your home comes after the storm. And we have been experiencing these storms nonstop in Burundi for decades. So that's what we did, and the community members donated the land, which is the only commodity they have, after going together and talking about how dehumanizing the living conditions they have been for so long, how they watch themselves die and their children die with no help at all available. And so that was important to know the what, and for how long and why it has happened. Neglect, and all kind of conditions. So, and how we started making bricks in this remote village of Kigutu, which is 59 miles away from the capital city. And we laid the foundation of what became Village Health Works in their own community. And the goal was really to build a clinic based on dignity, to bring decency in this village that had been decimated and dehumanized by the conditions they had been living in. So this is how Village Health Works started, and 10 years after we are becoming a teaching hospital. But we also integrated education because after seeing patients coming from different places, we really realized that our mission was going to be only hallucination without integrating education, linking health and education based on critical thinking, not on rote memorization, bringing a community together. That's how we...
It's really wonderful to hear what you've achieved, Deo. And now I want to shift to Besan Abu-Joudeh, who comes from one of the most contested areas in the world, from Palestine, who sometimes gets a lot of attention and effort and energy, and not always positive things coming out of the region. And you've started a crowdfunding platform to help get capital to entrepreneurship within the region. Can you tell us what was the source of your motivation to carry out this project?
Sure. So first of all, thank you for having me this morning. And it's really inspiring to be on this panel. I moved to Palestine a year and a half ago. I was born and raised in the US. And as a child, we'd take summer trips to go and visit my grandparents. And I always like to say that I wanted to study economics before I knew what an economy was. I was always intrigued why is there such a stark difference? Why isn't there more opportunity? So my background is in development economics, and I finally moved to Palestine a year and a half ago after my career had taken me to the GCC, DC, to work on economic policy. And when I arrived, I was very disappointed on so many levels. I was disheartened with what was possible by the corruption, by the obstacles. Time seems to move at a different pace in Palestine. You're working on an economic research paper, and there's a paper that's 10 years old that's still completely relevant to what you're doing. And it was clear that traditional economics wasn't going to answer this. It wasn't a matter of, doing macroeconomic research here, but instead trying to find an alternative, trying to address the apathy that had started to exist within the society. Palestine has always had a very strong civil society, and still does to this day. And it's the concept that these individuals who have ideas for their communities, to make them feel empowered. And that's the approach that we took with Build Palestine. Palestine's a donor-dependent economy. It has the highest aid per capita in the world. So it's not that there's a lack of resources. And I think this is something that was said on yesterday's panel that's really important, is it's never that there's a lack of resources. It's a matter of how do you redirect these resources so that they're more impactful and that they actually address these community needs. And that's at the heart of what we're trying to do with Build Palestine, is to empower these grassroots problem solvers. So when someone sees a problem in their community, for them to be able to challenge it and to ask, what can I do to address this? Instead of an international development consultant coming in and doing a needs assessment. And this is a really critical expertise that we want to bring to the development agenda, in addition to the supporters that are around the world. I mean, since we've started, we've had solidarity groups, from countries like Ireland and New Zealand reach out to us and say, this is great, can you help us find projects? We fundraise in our communities, we want to find projects to send them to. And it's a matter of connecting these two. So we knew that people on the ground had ideas, that they had dreams, that they had hopes, they saw the issues. And at the same time, given, I'm a member of the diaspora, my whole life I've wanted to help Palestine without ever actually living there, and I know how strong that connection is for many people from the diaspora and also supporters. And trying to bridge those two, to create a platform of trust, of empowerment, so that we can believe that something better can come.
This is wonderful. I think a lot of us that have left our country of origin, in my case, Mexico, some of us have great opportunities in the US and end up staying here. It's sometimes easier, right? But you two went back, and both of your goals are to give back and rebuild your own countries. So what have you taken from the American values system and from the way things run in this country? What has been useful for community building back in your countries? Whoever wants to answer.
Well, first of all, I think when you talk about the American values, I think there is something that, frankly, we don't think so much about. Every human being wants what you and I want, which is good health, access to education, access to basic needs, access to community that is peaceful and love. But then we don't have, in different places, like where I'm from, the kind of opportunities to have access to these things the way we do around here. So for me to be in this country, I have been extremely privileged and lucky to make friends. I came here without speaking a word of English. I was homeless. I didn't know anyone. And to be able to meet people who not only opened their doors for me and their hearts for me and collected everything that was left in me, ashes, and brought my dream back to life. I don't know whether I could have been luckier than that. So I learned that, horrors happen in the world, but truly the world has wonderful people. The problem is how much do they know about problems? How much they know about what is going on in the lives of other people who are so far away from them. So it was very helpful for me to actually not be shy, not to talk about what has been so humiliating in a community like mine where I was born and raised in those kind of conditions, to talk about it. And also being lucky to be in this education system where people are encouraged to ask questions, not to memorize facts, to think, was such an eye-opening. I remember when I was in primary school, the first year of my class, I was told to be civilized. There is only one language you need to learn. Not my native language, not any other language from the neighboring countries, but French. And it's not only the most beautiful language, but elegant. It's the language for the civilized people. Well, you know what? The joke was on me when I came to the United States to find out that actually there was no one who was speaking French. And so it's this community of uncivilized people, you see? But that's not what you get around here. Children are encouraged to think about problems and to solve them. Right here at MIT, you have a community that is thinking about global problems and how to solve them together. So that is extremely helpful, and that is similar to what we want to bring into communities that have been suffering from not really natural disasters, but man-made tragedies, because I call this because knowledge is available. We have so much to share with people. If we're not sharing this knowledge, what for then? Yeah. Medical technology is available. They were talking about diarrhea, people still dying from diseases that have been eradicated almost everywhere, but people who are working so hard have no access to any of these opportunities that we take for granted here. So it's been such a blessing for me to make friends that I have made here in the United States, who have joined our cause and went to make a difference in a country where people have not much in common about their humanity.
Great. Thanks, Deo. That's a great answer. How about you, Besan?
To put it very simply, until 4th grade, I wanted to be the president of the United States. I'm a Muslim American of Palestinian origin, fully thought that it was possible. And it was only when I heard that the president only makes $400,000 and always has such low approval ratings, I thought that it wasn't worth it. So I think that this belief that anything is possible is incredibly powerful, and it's so core to the American value system, so central to what made America the country that it is today. And it's incredibly critical to be able to share that across the world.
Besan, I wanted to ask you, I read somewhere that for your dissertation, for your degree, you wrote about the parallels between microfinance and Islamic finance. Can you share a little bit about that, and how did that inform what you do in your platform?
Sure. So so let me just preface this by saying that I was researching microfinance, and during my summer research, I had this core question that I wanted to know, which is, what is the profitability of these businesses? So a lot of people who assess the success of microfinance, they look at the repayment rates, they look at how many women borrowers are receiving access to this financial capital. And the question that I wanted to know is, how profitable are these businesses? So if I were in their shoes and if I were going to get this loan, to what extent will it increase my assets? And that's when I came upon Islamic finance. So Islamic finance has the musharaka or the mudaraba tools that stipulate that, at the core of Islamic finance is risk sharing, and the concept that you cannot have interest rates. So by risk sharing on a micro level, my dissertation focused on how can we have an Islamic microfinance structure where, instead of trying to take the existing microfinance structure and make it compliant to Sharia, how do we take what's at the essence of Sharia, which is risk sharing, and make it work on a micro level? So micro venture capital is essentially what we were trying to get at. And this is a very different, if anyone works for a VC fund, when you're trying to give out a $500 loan and it's a profit loss sharing scheme, you can anticipate that you would put significantly more resources behind that in order to see it successful. So the concept was that, how do we build trust with these local communities? So the challenges were information asymmetry, moral hazard, of people reporting their accurate earnings, but also more central is that it wasn't just financial capital that these organizations would be giving, but it was also the investment in the success of the business, which can come with access to suppliers, it can come with the network, and so much more. So on a similar level with Build Palestine, it's not just a crowdfunding platform. It's, we're trying to empower these grassroots problem solvers. We're fueling social entrepreneurship with local communities. And to be honest, the $5,000 that we give a project is, it would have been significantly easier for them to receive $5,000 as a grant. But by coaching them to run their campaign, by following up with them, by encouraging them to get started, by tracing their impact, and by helping them communicate this with supporters around the world, what we're doing is so much more than the financial piece.
I think I speak for the audience when I say that I could stay here and listen to you too, and the richness of the work that you do for hours, but unfortunately we are running out of time. So just one last question: how can the Solve MIT community help your ventures? And let's just stick to 1 minute answers.
Well, I think there is really a great opportunity for Solve and this community at MIT to really make a difference in at Village Earthworks, for example. We are in the process of building a $9 million hospital, which will be the world-class hospital, a teaching hospital, so that we can change the healthcare system and become a model for the country, so that we can treat people in a dignified environment, teach, and provide the quality healthcare. But how do you do that? You need staff, you need you need medical equipment, you need all that. And the previous speaker was talking about going to explore other planets. We've been having a hard time figuring out, how do we find medical equipment to get to Burundi? How do we take them to Burundi? And I hear MIT has a lot of departments, transportation, procurement, companies and all that. And what makes it so hard for for us to find what we need to actually address, basic needs in our communities. We were talking about last night diabetes. We have a lot of patients who are suffering from diabetes. They need insulin. You need refrigeration. Where do you keep them in a remote area of Burundi? So these are really, problems that are so serious, but yet so simple. They have solutions right here. And so it will be really important to, for all of you to think about this. Water is contaminated. We end up dealing with a lot of problems that can be prevented when you have people who are suffering from diarrhea.
I apologize, but we have to wrap it up. Yeah, sorry. And Besan, a call for action to...
If there's anyone who's interested in revolutionizing international aid, thinking about how can we take what's learned either in the field of economics or other departments and use technology to bridge that gap of trust, we'd be very happy to connect and already have met some great people at this conference.
Thanks again for your thoughts and thanks for listening.
Thank you so much.